Good morning, evening, afternoon, everyone. I am Dorm. This is Dorm Streams, and welcome back to the 100 best games of the decade as decided by me and me only. I hope you enjoyed the first video, and without further ado, we're going to get right into number 90 in the games of the decade list. We're going to be covering 90 through 81 today, so let's just get started. Number 90, Watch Dogs 2. Some games this decade, or this generation, really, console generation, the PS4, the Xbox One, a lot of the big open world games focused on narrative storytelling. A lot of the games focused on their graphical engines or enemy types or saturation of the map. What Watch Dogs 2 does this generation, this decade, to separate itself from the rest of these sort of check all the boxes kind of open world games is it focused primarily, and I think this had to have been the case internally, at least I'm guessing, they focused internally on fun. Watch Dogs 2 is a very fun game. The characters are fun, the missions are fun, they are GTA-like in their parody of modern culture, but not in a way that feels derivative of GTA. They are not afraid to mock themselves. There's a Ubisoft headquarters in Watch Dogs 2, and they poke fun at that. They're not afraid to mock culture of course, making fun of the Martin Shkreli, I don't really care enough to pronounce his name correctly, guy, making fun of that whole situation with the Wu-Tang Clan album. They poke fun at Scientology. They poke fun at all sorts of different types of people, media events, sensational things, social media even, but they do so in a way that is lighthearted and fun, and I think that is something to be celebrated. Watch Dogs 2 also is such a step up from Watch Dogs 1. I've sort of decided on the comparison from Watch Dogs 1 to 2 in that same jump from Batman Begins to Dark Knight. Watch Dogs 1 and Batman Begins both do a good job of setting the overall setting of their games or of their movies, their franchise, I suppose. They are sort of interesting, maybe a little bit too long, possibly take themselves too seriously, and are a good sort of proof of concept, I suppose, for the larger world they're building. I think those are two equivalent cases. And then The Dark Knight, or in this case, Watch Dogs 2, these sequels are better than their originals, which is rare, but they also do such a good job of building on the world they were given and making the world way more entertaining and interesting, and in Watch Dogs' case, fun. And even in The Dark Knight case, I think The Dark Knight is a more fun movie than Batman Begins. And both series do a good job of taking what is given to them in the first iteration of the title of the universe and moving them forward. One of my favorite parts about Watch Dogs 2 is Marcus, who is your main character. If you played Watch Dogs 1, Aiden was the main character of that game, and he was the most bland cover of a video game character that I've ever seen. Just a very bland white dude. The story was okay, but it was way too dramatic, especially for a game where you're hacking people and making fart noises with a dead sec button. So Watch Dogs 2, Marcus is way more appropriately interesting and appropriately fun. He seems to enjoy the universe, which makes the game way more enjoyable. As I've been playing through Watch Dogs 2 and start to finish here on the YouTube, that's a cheap plug, but it is a plug nonetheless. As I've been playing through the game, Marcus has been easily one of my favorite parts of the game, as well as the surrounding cast of DedSec this time around. And the characters are great. Marcus is, again, one of my favorite protagonists of the decade. He is so fun, so likable, and seeing him enjoy the game makes the game more enjoyable. Really, Watch Dogs 2 does everything Watch Dogs 1 did interestingly in a way more fun capacity. It's starting to finally find its character, and I have big hopes for Watch Dogs Legion coming soon. So hoping that they keep this spirit and this fun alive, because Watch Dogs 2 is an absolute blast. Number 89, Fortnite. Fortnite is without a doubt my least played game on this list. I've played maybe 10 hours of Fortnite altogether. That's when the game first came out, trying it for a couple of rounds, realizing I was still more of a PUBG person at the height of Fortnite. Playing it, passing the controller around with some of my buddies after a stream, if they all be over, hang out at the apartment with my roommate, and the occasional game on Switch when I first got my Switch and didn't have many games for it. That being said, it would almost be impossible to leave Fortnite out of this list simply for the fact that I don't think you can write the story of the 2010s in gaming without including Fortnite. It is, with the exception of maybe one other game on this list, the most influential game of the decade and one of the most influential video games of all time. It is to a younger generation what Halo and Call of Duty were to me growing up, which is the shooter that all of your friends are playing and that everybody wants to play after school and you can't wait to get home to play more Fortnite. And I think that is a legitimate compliment. I know it has become a meme that 14-year-olds just play Fortnite, but everybody's 14 at one point. You have that game that you rely on, and that was Halo 3 for me. That was Call of Duty Black Ops and Black Ops 2 for me in high school, and even did a little bit of like The Last of Us multiplayer. But there are these games that you grasp onto at that age that are sentimental and will be remembered throughout the entirety of your life as a gamer. And this game has introduced so many people to gaming and done so well. I don't know if Fortnite is an incredible game, but what they have done with Fortnite has been nothing short of incredible. The large scale events that they do on a massive stage that seem to go flawlessly every time. This is the only game I've ever seen do coordinated reveals in game like this. The excitement around this game is palpable even when I'm not playing Fortnite. I remember when Fortnite Season 2 happened early in 2019 and everyone was losing their mind, and it was done so well. And the reveal was so cool, and they ended Fortnite for a week. And I think this game deserves maybe the most credit of any game, and from a pure marketing standpoint, simply because of all the titles they've been able to bring in, but also just all the ways they've been able to change the gaming landscape. This is the first game that I remember. I know games have done it in the past, but this is the first game that I think on such a large scale and so pretty much flawlessly. There were a couple of snags along the way, but this is the first game I remember incorporating crossplay on such a large scale. You can play with anybody on any console, even mobile, which is ridiculous to me. Fortnite deserves to be heralded not only for its just widespread appeal, but also for the technical marvel that this game is. And I think I would be remiss to leave it off of this list, even if it's a game I didn't play much of. Number 88, Thomas Was Alone. Thomas Was Alone is a pretty simple idea. In it, you play as Thomas, a rectangle, who is, you guessed it, alone. That seems a simple enough concept, right? It's a platformer. You play as a lonely rectangle. But the thing that puts this game so high on the list when compared to other platformers, but in really compared to other games, is the amount of character in this game. So throughout the game, you meet other shapes. And even more throughout the game, there is a narrator who is narrating these quotes that come up on the screen about the way Thomas felt. And, Thomas loved hummus. And Thomas, it's all character building stuff about this rectangle. So by the end of the game, or throughout the game, as you meet other shapes and they factor into your playthrough of the game, it's a puzzle platformer, you start feeling connections to these polygons in a way that you did not think you would. Each of the characters is unique. They're all really well written despite not having many facets. They are multifaceted characters. And I just absolutely adore Thomas Was Alone. The gameplay is very fun. The puzzle platforming is pretty straightforward, but it's one of those games that you keep playing through to play the story. It's almost a narrative game with the guise of a platformer. The graphics are so easy to spot. One of the easiest to spot games from screenshots I've ever seen. Beautifully well rendered, but simple, really playing off long shadows and flat fronts. It's a really sign of the times of an early 2010s game, but in all the right ways. It was doing something experimental. It was an indie that set itself apart. Mike Bithell has made a bunch of really cool games this decade. Shout out to Volume, another game I really liked. Didn't make this list, but another game I really liked by Mike Bithell. Thomas Was Alone is just such an easy recommend, and it's a wonderful game. Play it. Number 87, Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice. Sekiro is something else. As I'm recording this video, I am currently playing through Sekiro. I go back and forth because I've been told both ways are correct and incorrect. So I apologize in advance if I switch pronunciations. But Sekiro is a beautiful game. It's made by From Software, the legendary developers behind the Dark Souls series, behind Demon Souls, Bloodborne, and now Sekiro. So you know what to expect in this game. The large-scale boss fights, the beautiful landscapes, the absolutely terrorizingly difficult gameplay. But I think this thing that sets Sekiro apart from other Souls games and maybe makes it the game with the most upside here. I could see myself doing this list again in a year and playing some games that I've missed in this decade, because as you saw the list last episode, I have missed quite a few games, so I could see myself updating this list in a year or so. I could definitely see this game moving up quite a bit. I think it has a tremendous upside. Right now, it's kind of hard to see the forest for the trees. I'm in the middle of a very difficult boss fight, and that might be why it's moving down the list. And I don't quite have the attachment to this game as I do other Souls games that I've played or other FromSoft games that I've played. But there are so many undeniably great things to this game. The visuals are incredible. The setting of feudal Japan is maybe the most interesting setting that FromSoft has done. I love their take on feudal Japan. I think it's awesome, as opposed to the medieval setting of the Souls games and the sort of Lovecraftian sort of setting of Bloodborne. I think this is the most beautiful setting. I think it's the easiest setting to get into from the outside, at least for me. And I think the story has been the most coherent by far of any From Software game I've played. I've only played Bloodborne, Dark Souls 3, and now this, but the stories were very hard to follow from both of the other games that I played. Sekiro, I at least kind of know what's going on. I think part of that is due in large part to having a protagonist that is set. In previous FromSoft games, you could create your own character. This protagonist is picked for you, and I think that works wonders. I love playing preset protagonists. I don't really care if I get to create my character or not. I also think the boss fights have been so interesting. The combat is very different from FromSoft games, and I think this is a game that some people will love and some people will hate simply because the combat is so different from other FromSoft games. For example, in Dark Souls 3, you're very much on the defensive a lot, but you're rolling and you're just getting out of the way of boss attacks. And kind of the same for Bloodborne. You can kind of approach it the same way. You can also shoot to parry with the gun you have, which I think is a wonderful mechanic. But in this game, you parry with your sword. It's a lot more taking the hit as you go, taking a blow, getting 2 hits in, taking a blow. But it's not as much rolling. It's not as much defensive play just to get away from the attack, because the bosses will punish you with large swooping attacks if you try to roll out of the way. So there's a lot to learn in Sekiro. I think that's one of the biggest aspects of it as to why people who are maybe veteran with the FromSoft series and the FromSoft games maybe weren't as happy about it when they first got into it. That being said, there is a lot to like and a lot to dislike in my current playthrough of Sekiro. Just how hard the boss fights are. There's one boss fight in particular that I felt was very, without mincing words, I guess, nearly lazy. That's too harsh a critique, I think, but it basically rehashes an entire fight, and that was very frustrating considering the fact that this game is, okay, once I've gotten over the hurdle, that means I'm done with this fight forever. The fact that I then had to do the fight again but ramped up was very annoying to me. That being said, that is just one gripe with the game. The game is wonderful, and if you like brutally hard games, I cannot recommend Sekiro enough. Number 86, No Man's Sky. This may be the most surprising game on this list from the outset of the launch of the game. When I've been on the journey with No Man's Sky. So I remember when it got announced, it was one of those games that seemed really interesting. It had so much buzz about it. I remember Reddit really loved the possibilities of No Man's Sky. And there was already a building community around the game before it even launched, just on the back of the promises it made. And I pre-ordered the game. I will be very transparent with my journey with this game. I pre-ordered the game. I was excited about it. I wasn't in the crew of people that were like, die hard, this is exactly what this game has to be. I was just ready to experience the game they promised. And there were some promises that at launch were either miscommunicated or maybe weren't there until another reveal or something. And I am not in any way going to blame the developer that. I know developing time is very hard to sort of manage and recompense in a gaming situation like this. But I do think the thing that No Man's Sky did incredibly well, and maybe, well, the only reason it landed on this list, but also maybe to the surprise of a lot of us, was it actually kept working at it. The game out of the box on release was okay. I played it for like 6-7 hours. I liked it, but got bored very quickly. Once you realize that the gameplay loop is very small and that there aren't a lot of things to do, just different places to do those things, it became a little transparent what the game was, and it was more tech demo than it was video game. And to Hello Games' credit, to absolutely their credit, they kept working on it, and they absolutely turned around the boat on this one. There's no other way to put it. They just saved the game. The game had such a bad PR around it. People were furious on pre-order. I was okay. I felt a little burned by it, but it wasn't one of those things that I was like, I'm never going to blame developers. I just know how hard development must be. And I know there were probably things outside of their control or technical issues they didn't foresee coming or whatever that could have stopped that. I don't think there was any malintent on anyone's part when the promises were made. I just think there were miscommunications. And the fact that they eventually delivered on all of those promises that I can think of, as well as adding so much in that No Man's Sky Next update, the thing that brought me back to the game, the thing that brought me back to streaming the game. What a wonderful week of gaming that was, or 2 weeks of gaming, I suppose. I played nothing but No Man's Sky for a while, and I was enamored with it, which is such a weird journey, going from pre-ordering it to kind of being disappointed, putting it on the shelf, not really playing it again, and then this game just builds such a fervent, loving community around it. What a 180. It is maybe the coolest story in gaming. I would love to read a long form feature about it. This game's so interesting to me, but No Man's Sky is ending up a wonderful game. It's not on this list just because of the story. The game's awesome. Sci-fi exploration on procedurally generated planets is one of the coolest pitches ever, and it lives up to that hype. Although there are some bugs, but being able to play with your friends while doing it, just what an incredible idea. And the follow through to actually finish that and not give up on the project deserves all the recognition that you could muster about a game like this. So yeah, No Man's Sky, a wonderful game now, coming from a place where it definitely couldn't have been at one point. Number 85, What Remains of Edith Finch. Another list, another time for a dorm narrative game. This time it's What Remains of Edith Finch. A game that I know a lot of people consider the best of these sort of walking simulator narrative style games. I really enjoy What Remains of Edith Finch. I thought the concept of the game is that you enter the Finch household, and you're basically trying to find out what happened to the family. The house is abandoned. You're just kind of going through their things, figuring out what happened to them, what's going on, why is it abandoned, what are all of their stories. And the way it breaks down basically is that each member of the family tree has their own isolated, almost episodic story within the game. And I think this structure is incredibly smart. It lets the game go on for maybe longer than other narrative experiences, but never get tiring. You never tire of the story or never tire of each character because you're moving on to the next character after 45 minutes, an hour with each character. So it really kind of does a great job of extending itself and making its gameplay value longer if you're really interested in that. I know a lot of people, I've never been one person to ascertain value from price in a way that it correlates to hours. So I'm not one of these people that like, $1 an hour, because my favorite games aren't 60 hours and I would gladly pay $60 for them. I think there's a large difference there between value and time spent in the game, but the game does a good job of extending its time with the player through these episodic experiences. And some of them are absolutely phenomenal. Some of the best stories, regardless of medium, I've ever heard, short stories. For example, to those who have played the game, the episode at the cannery with the person who works as a canner on a conveyor belt is one of the most genius stories I've ever heard. It is beautiful and macabre and dark and twisted, but also surprisingly heartwarming. It's such a good story. One of my favorite stories in gaming ever is that specific episode. The only thing bringing this game lower down the list, the reason that it's higher than other games, is because of some of those incredible episodes. There's another episode revolving around a comic book that's really, really interesting and good. Ultimately, for me, some of the stories just didn't hit quite the same. I think if all the stories hit in the same level for you, the player, as it did for me, on the Cannery episode, then I could absolutely understanding this being a top 10 game of the decade for you. 100%. For me personally, some of the narrative experiences I thought were a little too wacky and a little hard to follow, specifically the one with the child and the animals. That one for me was like a little too outside of the box and also just hard to follow. I still don't really understand what happened there, what caused that story. But that being said, that is only one of around 6 or 7. I don't remember. It's been a couple of years since I played the game, but I think around 6 stories that are so unique and such a wild ride. If you like short stories, this is, or movie shorts, independent short films, this is basically the closest we've gotten to that. As I said, Virginia was very cinematic. This is cinematic in a different way, that it's a bunch of episodic, it's almost like television. It's episodic stories told surrounding a larger whole. And yeah, What Remains of Edith Finch is so well done, so well made. Some of the stories, again, are just some of the best in gaming this decade, bar none. And it absolutely deserves a spot on this list. Number 84, The Beginner's Guide. The Beginner's Guide, your boy loves a weird game, and the Beginner's Guide might be one of the weirdest on this list. The concept for The Beginner's Guide is ultimately hard to explain. It is made by some of the same team that worked on the Stanley Parable, another very weird game. And the concept is that you are playing through a game developer's different experimental games as they're going through this larger journey. There's a narrator kind of telling you about this person, sort of from a removed, this was my friend and these are all the games they made kind of aspect. That is really not the story here. The story is more introspective than that. It's more about the human condition. And I know this may sound weird, that it sounds like you're playing a bunch of demos, and you basically are, and that relates to the human condition and the way we experience work when related to art, and art related to like making money. But ultimately, all of that stuff does influence this game, and it's using this sort of game developer's journey, who I believe is fictitious. I'm almost certain it is fictitious, but who knows? There may be some like 7 layers deep person that it really is about. You never can really guarantee with a game like this. But it's very art house in the way that it's using this sort of simple idea of you're playing through a bunch of demos someone made, or a bunch of smaller experiences someone made, when really that's telling you more about the human who made it than the game itself. And also that experience with that human is supposed to be a reflection of the way gaming treats its developers, and the way gaming treats the people who make their games, and also the way the people make their games experience their own games. It is so many bars removed from itself that it's incredible. This game is not going to be for everyone. I can understand that completely. I know people who would love this game. I know people who would abhor this game. That being said, I think it is such a monumentally weird but great experience. I love The Beginner's Guide. I came into it with a lot of hype, a lot of expectations, because I love the Stanley Parable, and it was different than what I expected coming into it, but it still hit me in a way that was so delightful and sad and just emotional that it had to be included on this list. It is a narrative game, but hidden under the guise of other smaller games. And it's just, the execution of this game is nearly flawless. I love this game so much. Number 83, This War of Mine. I don't know the first time I heard about This War of Mine. I don't remember if it was in a YouTube series that I saw, if I was watching someone stream it, if it was just one of those games you see in a Steam deal that people are enjoying, see another wish list. I don't know where I found This War of Mine, but I'm so happy I did. I feel like I must have hit onto something, because I've been a fan of this game since I think it was in open beta, or it was in like a Steam Greenlight kind of thing. And it is one of those success stories from Steam Early Access. The game is a post-apocalyptic survival game, and I know that pitch kind of speaks widely to gaming. I know there are a lot of games with that pitch, but the thing that sets This War of Mine apart is a lot of it is about maintaining relationships, about maintaining the health of your crew, and about maintaining just your overall surroundings. So it is a side-scrolling survival game, which you don't get a lot of. And it's almost set up more like a simulator in a weird way, like one of those kind of sim type of games. But it takes this layout of the side scrolling, you're looking at an abandoned house where you and your small crew have sort of holed up for the evening, and it makes it so weirdly realistic. I don't know. There's something so harrowing about the camera angle. It's almost like a soundstage kind of thing, mixed with the fact that you are seeing actual photographs, the best I can tell, of real people as the descriptor of each character that you're interacting with. If you don't know, it is a randomly generated game. So your crew is random. I believe the resources that you start with are random, and the resources you can get while going on scavenges are random. The basic gameplay of the game is this. You work throughout the day on your base, on your relationships, on like making better tools and better beds, and maybe making a radio so you can have the happiness of the group higher. And at night, you go out and scavenge. And so you can decide while you're scavenging, and the gameplay is very pretty much standard side-scrolling combat with some stealth mechanics. And when you choose where to scavenge, you can kind of play risk-reward. Well, this place might have the best tools, the best upgrades, maybe even some good weapons that we could use later on, but there are a lot more people, so we're either going to have to kill them or try to stealth around them or whatever. Or this place might have a lot of food, which is what we need a lot of this week, but it's not got a lot of anything else. So there are a lot of decisions to be made in this War of Mine to try to keep your whole party active, alive, and well. And you very rarely can do all of that. I never had much success in this War of Mine. I made it pretty far, I would imagine, for my ultimate ceiling of my playthrough of like what I considered possible for me, just because I'm not very good at those management style games. But it made management gameplay realistic. It made it reasonable. You would want to sort of pace out who gets what food when. I mean, it applies to the situation beautifully. And it's one of the more unique games, I think, on this list. I don't know another survival management, relationship management sort of game is on this list. And for that, I think it deserves a lot of credit. Number 82, Oxenfree. Yes, I know, another narrative game. This game, Oxenfree, made by Night School, is very much a indie music video as a video game. I'll explain. It features a very hip-looking modern cast of teenage kids who are going to the beach for some occasion. I can't remember if it's like a high school graduation party. It's something like that, or they're going out for someone's birthday, but they're going to this isolated location to go celebrate because some of the family members, there's a brother and sister in the group, and they have ties to this place. And it plays out almost in some regards like an 80s slasher flick or supernatural film, in that there are all these teenage casts, you know, they have these sort of back and forth moments. They're a very likable cast, and then there are those characters you really don't like. But the cool thing about Oxenfree is it's all about your decisions in the dialogue. So the basic gameplay is this. You kind of go scene to scene. You can move your character around. You can explore, similar to Telltale in this way, I suppose, where you can explore the scene. You can, you know, find other things. You can go down paths however you want. But the main loop of it, the main gameplay mechanic is that you decide how you talk to people. So you may have a character rub you in the wrong way in the very beginning and decide, well, I'm going to give them another chance. You know, we're going to learn this character, and that may pay off. Or you may say, look, you're an asshole to me. I'm established that we've known these characters, so I'm going to be an asshole to you. And therefore that kind of paints the narrative. Greg Miller, who I look up to immensely, once said about the Walking Dead Telltale game that it was like a coloring book, and everybody got the same pages, but how you colored in the pages were different. And that ultimately became how that was your coloring book and your experience with the coloring book. The same idea applies here. Oxenfree follows the same basic narrative, kind of a Stranger Things type of narrative, I believe, maybe right before or right after season 1 of Stranger Things. And it's sort of that like supernatural. There's a lot going on, but we don't know why. There's very 80s synthy stuff happening. Aesthetically, it's kind of dark and moody with lots of bright pops of neon. Everybody has a different coloring book of Oxenfree. I would say you probably don't vary as much in what colors you can choose from, but ultimately some of those decisions are your own. It definitely wants multiple playthroughs, or I think is something if you like seeing how character decisions go, then it warrants multiple playthroughs for sure. And it's just a very interesting, unique experience. If you like that kind of 80s sci-fi teen group sort of setting, then absolutely go for Oxenfree. It's a wonderful game with some really interesting twists, and I really like a lot of the character developments in that game. So pick up Oxenfree. Number 81, Infamous 2. Right at the start of the superhero movie era, of the Marvel era, Infamous 2, maybe of any game, makes you feel like you have superpowers more than any other game. In Infamous, you play as Cole McGrath, one of the greatest protagonist names of all time. That's such a video game name. It's amazing. Who was a bike messenger in New York City, or in their version of New York City. And he is carrying this orb that has superpowers, although he doesn't know it. And he's driving the delivery, because he just knows it's a box, to its destination. It blows up, leaving multiple hundreds of people dead, and also leaving him imbued with these superpowers. That's the plot of Infamous 1. You're kind of seeing how you can act with these superpowers. It's a game with a karma mechanic, sometimes described as an adopt the kittens or drown the kittens mechanic. But you can basically make your decisions in Infamous 1 if you want to be a good superhero or an evil one, or a supervillain, I suppose, because you can sort of take this turn in these narrative moments two different ways, right? You could say, well, I've killed a bunch of people, I might as well just begin there, start killing other people. Or the other good guy route would be to atone for these actions and to try to save people instead. And Infamous 2 builds upon this character. Weirdly, they changed the voice actor. It's something that's one of the strangest decisions, I think. I think the voice actor for 2 is probably better, but it's just weird that they changed the voice actor for a sequel game and changed nothing else. But in Infamous 2, you still play as Cole. You have one of my favorite side characters in any game, Zeke, who I think would be a great person for me to cosplay. He's incredible. You have some interesting characters in this police officer who is sort of guiding you on your journey against these other, what they call conduits, which are people who have powers. There's another conduit on the way that they know is only known as the Beast. They don't really know what's going on. They just know something's going on in New Marais, which is their version of New Orleans, which is a wonderful backdrop for Infamous 2. The sort of bright lights but swampy countertones to New Orleans set perfectly for this sort of, do I want to be glitz and glam? Do I want to be a super great guy? Or do I want to follow the darker path? There are even characters in Quo, who is, I guess, the good guy, who is the officer that is on your case. And in, I believe her name is Nyx. It's been a while since I played this game, but she is sort of like the swamp voodoo lady, kind of, but she has superpowers too. So they call her like a witch and things. And they're sort of your good angel, bad angel on your shoulder, but they both make decisions that are maybe not the best for Cole and maybe not the best decision overall. So you kind of have to weigh the pros and cons there. I think Infamous 2 builds on a lot of things Infamous 1 does really well. I think they make the narrative decisions more important. In reading for this list, I played a pretty standard good guy playthrough and I played it. But from what I've read, the story can differ quite a lot compared on whether you went good guy or bad guy. I think that's a really cool idea for a game of this scale. This is a AAA game made by Sucker Punch, a very, very talented developer studio. And I think Infamous 2 does a lot of things really interesting. Like the combat can be a little Gears of War-y, where you kind of want to do a lot of attacks and get back and get into cover. And it's a lot of ebb and flow. But the traversal of those games, if you've played any Sucker Punch game, if you played Sly Cooper, or any of the Infamous games, you're very well aware of how great traversal in Sucker Punch games feels. This game is no different. You can glide on rails. You can do all sorts of fun things throughout the world. Moving is an absolute joy. The characters, I think, are a much better, more fulfilled character cast than Infamous 1 than I remember. Again, Infamous 1 is a little bit older and a little bit hazier for me. But Infamous 2 is just a hallmark of the PS3 era for me that happened later in the PS3's life cycle, of course. Anything that would be from the PS3 in this decade would be in the latter half of its life cycle. But that is one of the penultimate series to come to PlayStation from the PS2 to PS3 jump. Infamous is one of those series that I feel like has to be acknowledged in some way. Infamous 2, I think, is better than Infamous Second Son, the PS4 game. I like Second Son a lot, but I think 2 just has a little bit more character to it, and is just a game that was ahead of its time more than Second Son, which by that time had kind of fallen into its time, if that makes sense. And Infamous 2 is just a wonderful I want to feel like a badass. Let me use my electrical powers to go explode some stuff and see what happens kind of game. And that's it. That is all I have for today. That has been 90 through 81. Next time, of course, 80 through 71. We're going to be, again, posting these once a week every Monday. Each of these videos are going to go up. We're going to do 10 weeks of this and then return to the YouTube content as normal. I've got in retrospects, I've got dorm plays, got start to finishes, although start to finish maybe post a little bit less just so I don't burn myself out on Watch Dogs 2, which is a very long game. But yeah, all that content's going to be coming back. Thank you to all the patrons. We have a new patron, as you can see here. Thank you all so much for the Patreon support. I really, really appreciate it a lot. If you haven't seen, these are our patrons. Please go show them some love. If you know them, go give them a follow on Twitch or Twitter or wherever you may see their name pop up, or just thank you for being patrons. Thank you for supporting all of the endeavors that I try to do. Thank you so much to the patrons. As always, take care of the dorm. I'm gone, and I'll see you in the next video.